Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and guys, we got some stuff to talk about today as we get into our NHL Power Rankings for Week 3 of the NHL season. So we'll be getting into that today. So to start things off, we're doing something different. We're going to be going over some highlights of the week. A couple of things we have to get through. Some of the bad stuff we're going to get through. The Florida Panthers, Sergei Bobrovsky out day-to-day with a lower body injury. Hopefully this is nothing long-term, as he has put up some really solid numbers on the Florida Panthers' hot start to the season. The Arizona Coyotes, at this point through 11 games, have not won a hockey game yet this season. They are 0-9-2 to start their season. They are winless, and it's looked pretty ugly for the Arizona Coyotes. A tough look, and sadly, it will get worse for the Coyotes. We're hearing potential rumors of a Phil Kessel trade here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully months at some point, definitely before the trade deadline. Not the best note to start off, but we're going to get off to some better stuff here. The Edmonton Oilers, Connor McDavid, wow, he had his probably best goal of the NHL season and his NHL career. Connor McDavid just absolutely walking the New York Rangers in overtime the other night, just goofying that defense. A great look for Connor McDavid, as kind of capping off a great week for the Edmonton Oilers overall. The Washington Capitals side of things have not looked great for the Capitals. A couple injuries, a couple suspensions, a couple of just not great games, but there is a little bit of a bright spot for the Caps. Connor McMichael, a former first-round pick back in the 2018 NHL draft, gets his first NHL goal this week. Congrats there to Connor McMichael. The Seattle Kraken get their first hat trick of their franchise, and it is from none other than the former New York Islander, Jordan Eberle. He ended up having a great game there, a 3-goal game against the Buffalo Sabres, and a huge win at home for the Seattle Kraken. The Winnipeg Jets, Kyle Connor is probably the most interesting thing to start this season. Kyle Connor, through the first 10 games of the NHL season, has 16 goals. He's up in competition with Ilya Kovalchuk. He's in that realm. Kovalchuk has the previous two records with 16 and 17 points in the first 10 or 11 games of the season. Kyle Connor is right in that company. He has had, I would dare I say, an elite start to the NHL season, and his kickstart a pretty solid campaign for the Winnipeg Jets. So with that out of the way, let's get into this week's power ranking. So things are pretty interesting at the bottom, but it's more of the same sort of teams, and you'll see that reflected here. So at 32, once again, is the Arizona Coyotes. No howling for the Coyotes here. They are just limping their way through this season. They are I have an 11-game losing streak. They are the last defeated team in the NHL. They have not won a game this season. It's going to be a rough year in Arizona. Yeah, that's why they're at 32. No real question there. At number 31 is the Chicago Blackhawks. They finally got off the Nas. They've finally gotten off to their first victory of this season. They've gotten close over a little, the last couple of weeks, but they finally get that win. They still find themselves at the bottom half of the league. They still really struggled this year, but hey, they got rid of that defeated start to the season. They finally got that one win. Again, another team. It's going to be a rough season for the Blackhawks. The only problem is for the Blackhawks, the expectations were much higher than the Arizona Coyotes, and again, it's proving all those teams that want to blow everything up and start from scratch. This is why that's not always the best situation, because you end up having teams, it takes a while to get back, and that's where the Blackhawks are right now. Now, at number 30 is the Montreal Canadiens. Kind of encapsulated from last night's game against the New York Islanders, a 6-2 defeat. The Boo Birds were coming out at the end of the second period, a 5-0 game after 2, and the Habs fans were letting the Habs hear it. And Brock Nelson got a hat trick in that 4-goal game. Again, not a great start to the season for the Habs. The defense has been all over the place. They find themselves at 30 in the power rankings. At number 29 is the Ottawa Senators. They're currently on a 3-game losing streak. They have not looked great. Definitely fallen off from the form we saw through the first 5 or 6 games of this season, beating the Maple Leafs at one point, keeping another game close with the Leafs. and they've kind of just fallen off since then. This is a team that on that road trip kind of found themselves, just miscues and little things like that. The defense definitely hasn't been there for the Sens, and unfortunately, here they are at the bottom half of the NHL Power Rankings. Now, at 28, this is a team that I've been pretty high on, but they are actually one of the longest losing streak in the NHL, other than Arizona. A 4-game losing streak right now for the Detroit Red Wings. This is a team that was in the top half of the top 15, top 20 last week, and all of a sudden they have not won a game this past week, and here they are now finding themselves in the bottom half once again of the NHL standings. There is some optimism for the Red Wings fans out there, but it definitely hasn't been pretty this past week. The New Jersey Devils right now, they are currently on a 3-game losing streak. They are not playing their best hockey, but again, they've had some injuries at some key positions with Jack Hughes out, and of course Mackenzie Blackwood still out. This is a team that is reeling early in the season. Injuries were a problem for this team last year. Because of the lack of depth, we're seeing the injuries continue to build up. The good thing is we did see a little bit of Alexander Holtz making his NHL debut here on this West Coast road trip. But this West Coast road trip has not seemed to have helped the situation for the New Jersey Devils. At number 26 is the Vancouver Canucks. Yeah, the Canucks. Not a great start for the Canucks here. Everybody had higher expectations for them. I kind of expected them to be here. Just not enough. They're not getting enough from this team, and it's very frustrating because you look at the roster and you think that the Vancouver Canucks should be at the very least in the top 20, right? At the very least. Right now they find themselves in the bottom 10 of our NHL Power Rankings, at the bottom half of the NHL standings, and for all that matter, right now at the bottom of the Pacific Division, even behind the expansion Kraken. There is some genuine concern about the Canucks, and if the goaltending doesn't get a little bit better, the Canucks are going to be really in a different spot than where we thought they may be at this point. Now, number 25 is the Seattle Kraken. They just got a victory over the Buffalo Sabres the other night. Like I mentioned, Jordan Eberle. The Seattle Kraken have turned their season around just a little bit. It's been a slow progression to winning, but they are starting to get their footing under them, and it's not too late for the Kraken to still give themselves a crack, a crack at the playoffs. I mean, Vegas has been a little bit slow coming out. LA seems to be catching form a little bit, but there's still some light there for the Seattle Kraken, and listen, they've given themselves an opportunity, at least in that Pacific Division, to maybe make a run at it here. Now, number 24, the Buffalo Sabres. I finally raised them in last week's Power Rankings. They look pretty solid. I think it was like 6-2-1. They have now since then gone on a 3-game losing streak. This West Coast road trip hasn't been too kind to the Buffalo Sabres either, just like we talked about here with the Devils. Same kind of story here for a couple of teams, which we're going to get to, but one of those teams, yes, is in fact guys, I just had a blip. The Buffalo Sabres. Been a long week, guys. At number 23, I'm pretty disappointed here with this team, and that's the Colorado Avalanche. The Avalanche, again, you look at their team on paper, and you would think they should be a better team. And, they had, Stanley Cup favorite aspirations at the beginning of this season and at the end of last season. That, sort of mentality has seemingly changed. The Avalanche goaltending, Darcy Kemper's been good. The defense has been a little bit shaky. And the depth scoring has been a problem. So the Colorado Avalanche all of a sudden here find themselves in the bottom half of our power rankings. And I'm not really sure when it's not like they have these huge injuries. It's just they just don't have the depth that they've had over the past 2 or 3 seasons. And it's starting to finally show in the cracks. And here we are with the Avs. Now, number 22 is the Dallas Stars. They just had a pretty impressive victory the other night, and you're starting to see some form of the Dallas Stars maybe finding some success. They beat the Calgary Flames the other night in Calgary, a very hot team to start this season in Calgary. So, the Dallas Stars, a pretty nice game there. They're still finding themselves, at the bottom half of our rankings, but they did move up, I think, 3 or 4 spots this week. And it's one of those things where you moved, but I don't know how much more up they will move next week, even if they have a great week. Because now we're starting to get to the point where a dozen games into the NHL season, you're not going to see as much fluctuation in our power rankings. And I think the Dallas Stars right now, they're just in that spot where they're doing enough to keep themselves from going down. They're not necessarily doing enough to move themselves forward, and I think that's where the Stars are at right now. Now, number 21 is the Boston Bruins. We, very, talked about thing up in Boston to start the season was Patrice Bergeron had a little bit of a slow start, and he is starting to turn that around. He had a great game the other night. He's starting to get back into Patrice Bergeron elite form. And I think that's huge for the Boston Bruins, a team that, everybody's saying should be a playoff team. And now we're starting to see some other teams in that conference start to pick things up from a slow start. It's going to be important for the Bruins to make sure they keep up. They're currently on a 2-game winning streak, and they're giving themselves an opportunity at this point. Now, number 20 here it's been a rough couple of weeks here for the Pittsburgh Penguins as, Crosby comes back last weekend. It looks great. He's back, for Halloween. And then as soon as Monday or Tuesday, he's on the long-term injured reserve with COVID protocol. So that is concerning. They also lost a top defenseman, Brian Dumoulin. Jeff Carter's been in and out. So, it's been a rough start for the Penguins. You're expecting that depth to just, let them hold up just a little bit longer. But there's only so much you can expect from them. I think they need to reset things just a little bit in Pittsburgh. But as of this point, I'm not too concerned with the Penguins, but the way they're playing, it just comes down to how long are these guys going to be out, because they can only hold on for so long. It was a rough week for the Penguins, but with all that said, they only moved down a couple spots in the power rankings because a couple of teams lower, just slightly lower than them, have gone on winning streaks, and that's all it really takes here this early in the season. It's still at number 19, guys, a team that was on a 5-game losing streak. I'm wearing their jersey today because, to be honest, I don't know how many times this season I will be able to wear a Ducks jersey. Don't look now. The Anaheim Ducks are on a 3-game winning streak, and I could see the Ducks regressing back to some form of a bottom 10 team next week if they, kind of stay, if let's say they go 500 this week, they still might find themselves moving down next week, because I just don't know. We've heard some stuff about John Gibson this week, how, he has never said he wants to leave the organization. He is all in as a leader there in Anaheim. That's good. That's some good stuff to hear. But at the end of the day, could be just some food lettuce. You don't really know, what word lettuce, I guess that's called, word lettuce. So you don't really know until a trade gets done. But as of right now, it seems good on that front. And again, a 3-game winning streak does help temper that kind of talk. The 6-game losing streak did kind of hurt, though. At number 18, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets. CBJ has kind of just stuck around here in the weeds. Now, Patrick Laine has been placed on the long-term injured reserve. That is a little bit concerning there for the Blue Jackets, a huge part of their offense. Boone Jenner, the new captain of the team this year, he's gotten off to a great start. The goaltending's been pretty good for the Blue Jackets as well. And here they find themselves right in the middle of the pack here to start the season. And I was really expecting them to fall back. Last week they kind of regressed. You're expecting that to kind of continue. All of a sudden, here they go. They're back on pace, and they're keeping themselves, just above water. And I think that's good enough right now for the Blue Jackets, who, again, you look at what they did this past summer. There was some genuine concern in CBJ that this team could really fall off. But great job by Kekalainen and the staff there. They've done a good job so far. At number 17, another team, kind of like the Blue Jackets, who, last week we saw them go on a horrid losing streak. I think they lost 6 or 7 in a row. And the Los Angeles Kings, what's in the water this week in California? Those, the Ducks and the Kings currently on winning streaks. The Kings are on a 4-game winning streak all of a sudden. And here they are. They find themselves at 17 in the power rankings. So, keep an eye on those LA Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. I think, they had some really tough stretches here last week. They seem to be, trying to regroup themselves from that. And got to give credit where it's due. Some really good stuff there for those two California teams. Now, another team that's very interesting right now, and I have them on the upper half of the power rankings at 16 and, technically in a playoff spot. The Nashville Predators. The Nashville Predators have been very interesting to watch here through the first start of the season. They didn't, they came out of the gate the first 2 or 3 games. They looked pretty good. And then they started losing to Seattle. And then they went on a little skid there. And don't look now, but the past 5 games, the Nashville Predators have won 4 of their past 5 games. And all of a sudden, I watched them last Saturday against the Islanders. And they looked impressive, despite the Islanders kind of outplaying them. Nashville has been able to stick out some of these games where maybe they weren't the better team. Especially on paper, they don't have the better team this year, but they're just finding ways to win. And credit to UC Saros for playing really well in between the pipes and just getting enough scoring to hold this team over. And again, kind of like CBJ, just, head above water. And I think that is the mindset for those two teams right now. And it just gives them a chance, right? All you could ask for is a chance. And Nashville is doing that right now. Who would have thought Nashville and Vegas would be next to each other in the power rankings this early in the season? In the preseason, I would have said you're crazy. But that's where we're at. At number 15 is the Vegas Golden Knights. And obviously the whole Jack Eichel situation is going to favor the morale in the locker room for the Golden Knights. Not the fact that Eichel will be in the room. Probably won't see Eichel till after the Olympic break in February at the very earliest. But the good news is, this team has finally looked a little different since that Eichel trade. The other night up in Ottawa, Robin Leonard, in press conferences was very displeased with the way his team has started this season. They haven't been the best in front of him. He's actually played quite well. And you guys know I'm a big Leonard fan, so I don't think there's bias, though. I mean, you look at his numbers, he's had some really good numbers. And now the team, defensively in particular, has to step up a little bit and get some more goal scoring. And, Brett Howden getting a goal the other night, a former Ranger, that's one of the guys they brought in. They're expecting those guys to, add to this team some depth scoring. And I keep talking about that, but, it's really important. And that's one of the reasons they brought Eichel in, because they need that guy at the top, but they also need the depth. And I think they addressed the depth this summer. As long as they can stay healthy, I think this is a really good Golden Knights team in the future. I am still on the fence about them, even this season, potentially missing the Stanley Cup playoffs. Dun, dun, dun. We'll have to wait and see what happens there, to be continued. But number 14, another team to be continued this season, because we're staying in the Pacific Division. At 14, we have the San Jose Sharks. And I don't want to be moving these guys down, but I also don't want to move them up, because the Sharks are just kind of there. Now, the interesting thing you have to look at with the Sharks right now is James Reimer. James Reimer's numbers, both save percentage and goals against average, are top 4 in the NHL. Who would have thought that, right? After what James Reimer has been through in Florida, in Carolina, and all of a sudden, James Reimer, has kind of taken the starting gig right now from Adin Hill. And all of a sudden, you're looking at James Reimer and saying, this is the James Reimer we remember seeing at, certain points in his career in Toronto. Unbelievable stuff for Reimer, just kind of proving everybody wrong. And, a goaltending tandem in San Jose, everyone was saying, I like Adin Hill. I don't know about Reimer. He's looked pretty good out of the gates for the Sharks. And what was the big thing we talked about for the past 2 or 3 seasons now for the Sharks? Jones and and Aaron Dell were not getting it done. And all of a sudden, here they have decent goaltending, and they find themselves potentially in a playoff spot. And again, early season projections were a month into the season, but still, that is something to account for. Now, moving up to number 13, lucky number 13, right? Who better than the defending Stanley Cup champions, looking to three-peat, nonetheless? It's the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, the Tampa Bay Lightning, I do have some concern about the Lightning, because John Cooper said it best in last night's post-game press conference after the Leafs game. Now, I'll talk about the Leafs in a minute, but John Cooper was basically, there's been a couple of undisciplined, moves from Sergachev and, even Hedman, the way he was hooking Marner. I think that was more to keep Marner from scoring. Take the penalty, but don't give him the goal. Don't give him that, odd man rush. I get that, the breakaway. But just undisciplined, just not typical Tampa Bay form. And I think they were expected to come into the season, and the problem is they're too busy looking ahead in the calendar. They're already looking at February, March. What are we going to do at the trade deadline? Where are we going to seed in the playoffs? You got to get there first. The NHL isn't that easy, and I think Tampa Bay has had it a little bit too easy the past 2 years. We may be seeing a little bit of a pendulum swing in that Atlantic Division, and I don't know if the Tampa Bay Lightning were expecting that so soon, but that is the NHL, guys, right? So I think Tampa Bay is realizing that a little bit, and if Tampa Bay stops kicking themselves, where the sun don't shine, if they stop kicking themselves in the nuts, I think they're going to give themselves more room to improve, and just the poise and the leadership. I'm surprised that we're seeing this from the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like I said, a very veteran-led, experienced, poised hockey team, just making some little mistakes that just are costing them games, like the one we saw in Toronto, and we've seen them in other games, like that game in Detroit earlier in the season. Tampa Bay is just, they could very easily put themselves in the top 5, by the next 2 weeks, because the skill and the lineup is there, but it's just they're not putting it together right now. And again, I know they had a lot of turnover, but still, just a little bit surprising with what I've seen from Tampa to start this year. All right. Number 12. Now, as we get into the top dozen teams here, at number 12, this was a team I left for dead last week. And they were on a losing streak, and everything was wrong in Toronto. The sky was falling in Toronto, and then they go on a 4-game winning streak, and everybody's talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, I do have something to say about that. I didn't want to move Toronto into the top 15 for that matter. But because they beat Tampa last night, again, I look at head-to-head matchups. I do look at that because at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about, right? If these two teams were to play each other tonight, who would win that game? And again, to some extent, you can't control that. Again, if a team goes on an 8-game losing streak and then they win 5 in a row, well, where do they stand, right? And they could still be at the bottom half of the league, right? So it's one of those things, but I do look at Toronto's win streak as, the opposite of Tampa. They're not kicking themselves in the foot. Mitch Marner scoring goals. I saw something different from the Leafs last night when Marner got that hit from Sergachev. The way John Tavares stepped up. Listen, I've had my things about JT and, not like him as a player, but I'm going to give him some props here. This is something we have not seen from John Tavares over his entire career in the NHL. He's not a guy that, there's a cheap shot on his teammate, he'll kind of walk to the side and, very nonchalant. That wasn't the John Tavares we saw the other night. And maybe that's him growing as a person, growing as a hockey player, that more of a poised player. But the way he stepped up for Mitch in that situation, I'm going to give him credit for that. And he ends up scoring a big goal later in that game. He ends up getting the OT winner. That's the kind of leadership and the captaincy that the Leafs need right now. And this is a guy that I've berated in my time as, even when he was with the Islanders. A guy that was just very quiet and almost too meek to be a leader. But I think what we're seeing from him as he grows as an NHL player in his 30s now, he has become a guy that, honestly, I have to give him a little bit of credit for him. And it was best exemplified the other night against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I'm going to give a little credit there. But that's it. All right. Tavares sucks, this and that. We're going back to that mindset after what I said. So at number 11, we have the Minnesota Wild. And the Minnesota Wild, the next two teams, I always compare them to each other because it seems like they're a team that always gets into the first round of the playoffs and then just gets beaten up, and they get clean, they get brought to the cleaners. The Minnesota Wild have kind of tailed off. Now their record still looks good. I think they're 6-3, 6-4, 6-3-1, something like that. They're still way above 500. But all of a sudden, you're starting to see them win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game. And they aren't as consistent as they were earlier in this season. I think that's just part of the season. You're starting to see the equalization of the NHL standings, just how close everybody is. And you're kind of seeing Minnesota kind of fall back because other teams have stepped up. And I think that's really where Minnesota is. In the top 10, we didn't see a ton of change here, and you're going to kind of see that here. And that's why at number 10, I'm talking about the Philadelphia Flyers, who have kind of done the same thing. they're there. They have good goaltending. They're winning games, but then they're losing games. They win 2 games, then they lose a game. That consistency factor. I know it's difficult in an NHL season, but the Flyers have just found themselves, just moving down a little bit. But again, they aren't a bad team by any stretch. But the Flyers, again, I think there's a team ahead of them that's just better. And that's what took out Minnesota from the top 10. And again, maybe this is bias. Call it whatever you want. But if you're looking at the New York Islanders over the past couple of weeks, the Islanders are currently one of the better teams over the past, I would say, 2 weeks in the NHL standings. Don't look now, but the Islanders, they were on a really nice, point streak. They're on a good stretch right now. They just beat up on the Montreal Canadiens. They didn't play down to the level of their opponent. Brock Nelson, has 6 goals on the season, gets 4 of them in that game. Oliver Wahlstrom scoring again. That's the kind of stuff that you want to see from the New York Islanders. The goaltendings continue to be great. Frustrating opponents, perfectly exemplified against the Habs the other night. So you're just seeing the Islanders kind of round into form finally. And you're seeing an Islanders team that we expected to see. And if it hadn't been for those first 2 games in Carolina and Florida, the Islanders have been a respectable team since then, and I don't know if people are giving them enough credit. Maybe we'll see that in the power rankings from other people this week. I'll be the first to do it for you, but the Islanders are finally rounding into form and looking like the franchise that we expected them to be going into this season. Toward the top of the Metro Division, competing for the top of that group, and obviously making the playoffs, right? That's the end goal right now, just to get your ticket into the playoffs. I think the Islanders can do that. And now we're starting to see some teams shift here because the next 3 teams are currently on a 2-game losing streak. We talked about them glowingly to start the season, and then they go on a little losing streak. So right now we're talking about the Washington Capitals. Like I mentioned earlier, congrats to Connor McMichael on his first NHL goal, but there was also some not so comfortable discussions. Anthony Mantha currently out with an injury. That's a little bit concerning. Tom Wilson with that own goal the other night up in Ottawa. You're just like, what is going on? There are just weird things happening in Washington right now. Again, the goaltending hasn't been perfect. But Washington, man, I'm keeping an eye on them. They're a team, like the next 2 teams we're going to talk about. They had that great start. And all of a sudden, once they lose the mojo, all of a sudden it's, what's going on? That's where we're at with the Capitals. And all of a sudden, the Islanders and Capitals are right up against each other in our power rankings. So there you go. Now, at number 7, again, another team, the Calgary Flames, currently on a 2-game losing streak. Now, I really hope this Jack Eichel situation hasn't led to other problems because I'm sorry, but Matthew Tkachuk, I'm not even sorry. I'm not apologizing for this. Calgary's Matthew Tkachuk, he's had an interesting week. Everything with the Jack Eichel talk, Kevin Weeks, supposedly it was a leaked thing. I'm going to talk about that in another video probably, how, basically the Sabres were leaking information to Kevin Weeks that, Tkachuk was in the deal to raise the price from Vegas in order to get more for Eichel in that deal with the Golden Knights. I think it's kind of led to some turmoil in Calgary. Matthew Tkachuk, barking at the refs and just very undisciplined. And I understand emotions take over at points, but there's no reason for that. That is not a leader. And I'm going to call out Matthew Tkachuk here. That is unacceptable. You cannot be doing that. And if there's the potential you're going to be a captain for this team, you can't be doing stuff like that. And you just saw your brother get the captaincy, your younger brother get the captaincy in Ottawa. Grow up, man. I'm tired of that. And I know Calgary Flame fans are going to probably agree with me with that because there's just no room for that. And this is a team that has just been too good to start the season. To see him, go all haywire in a 2-game losing streak, there's just no reason for that. Be poised, get back on track, and get a 5-game winning streak next week. And we'll be talking about the Flames in the top 5 next week if they do that, right? So, just something to keep an eye on. Now, number 6, moving out of the top 5 here, just barely, but they're moving out of the top 5. The Rangers are on a 2-game losing skid. They find themselves at number 6 in our power rankings, and they're not doing anything wrong. Igor Shesterkin, top 5 numbers in the NHL for goals against and save percentage. Good stuff there, but again, there's been some things with the Rangers that I haven't been a huge fan of. And this is a team that is going to be, looked at as, they go on a 3 or 4 game losing skid. Here we go. It's the same Rangers we've seen in years past. They're just back to where they were. I am going to mention, though, if you guys haven't seen the dangles from Vitaly Kravtsov right now over in Europe, well, you could say whatever. Oh, he would have got blown up in the NHL. That was a pretty sick move. And listen, I know Kravtsov had his issues there with the Rangers, but you add that guy to the mix? I'm happy he's over in Europe. Let's just say that. As an Islander fan, I'm happy he's in Europe and he's going to get traded. But Ranger fans, again, whatever. That's part of it, I guess. But anyway, at number 5, we have the Winnipeg Jets. I already talked about Kyle Connor. He has been so good to start the season. We see Nikolai Ehlers get on the board. I think his 3rd or 4th of the season. Getting Skittles for a puck from a fan. You love seeing that. Just some fun stuff there. Ehlers is getting off the board. He's getting some goals. His family was in town. Watched him score that sick snipe the other night. So the Winnipeg Jets, things are just... They continue to move up the power rankings week by week by week. I could have worn their jersey again today. Just resilient. A very resilient team. Even when Wheeler and Scheifele were out of the lineup. Hellebuck's out of the lineup right now. Eric Comrie started 2 games in a row, and they're winning the games. So, the Jets just, again, a dark horse team to win the Stanley Cup right now. Again, I may have just jinxed them saying that, but I really like what I've seen from these Winnipeg Jets right now. Now, number 4, St. Louis Blues. Again, you Blues fans have been saying, where's the love? We're doing well to start the season. Tarasenko's been good. Move us up in the power rankings. Well, you're finally getting your due. And the St. Louis Blues have kind of just done enough to move up and not move down. And the Rangers and Calgary and Washington did enough to move down where they find themselves in the top 5. And I've really liked what I've seen from the St. Louis Blues. This hasn't been the great team in the NHL to start the season, but they're very quietly outside of those top 3 teams, and probably Winnipeg, the other team, because they're Canadian. The Blues, out of the top 5 teams here, are the most underrated team that nobody's talking about. And they're just scoring goals. They have the young guy stepping in, playing well, and they're just doing what they have to do. Ville Husso has played a lot better. Jordan Binnington's played good enough. And the Blues are just winning hockey games. And I think their record is 6-2-1 or 6-1-1, something like that. So again, you got to be pretty happy with what you've seen as a Blues fan. From what you saw last season, this has been a really nice turnaround story up in St. Louis. And now we get into the top 3. And the Edmonton Oilers find themselves back in the top 3. They're currently on a 4-game winning streak. Connor McDavid is scoring at will, most recently against the Rangers, his most recent victim. Jesse Puljujarvi is scoring goals. Zach Hyman's scoring goals. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is scoring goals. Everybody's scoring there. In every game so far to start this season, the Edmonton Oilers have scored a power play goal in every single game to start this season. It's pretty impressive. The fact they were able to draw enough penalties and they were able to score enough goals on the power play when they needed it. They are that consistent right now. And let me just give a second. I was kind of talking smack about Mikko Koskinen over the past 2 weeks. Guys, he has been really good in place of Mike Smith. So I have to give some credit there to Mikko Koskinen. He had a really tough season last year. Didn't get off on the best foot. He had the injury, moving away from his family in Europe. And all of a sudden, Mikko Koskinen just... Again, I have to give applause because I gave him some heat the past 2 weeks. You got to give the love when it's deserved, and that is to Mikko Koskinen this week. A really nice story to start the season up in Edmonton. Just everything's firing on all cylinders. Had they not had those 1 or 2 losses to start the year, they would be number 1 in our power rankings. But the problem is there's still undefeated teams here, and that's what we're going to get to here at number 2. It's the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, the Carolina Hurricanes are on a 9-game winning streak. They are 9-0-0 to start the season. The last undefeated team in the NHL, and they've been that way now. They've been the lone team undefeated for the past week and a half now. So I thought I was going to jinx them earlier this week because I made an undefeated Canes video. They ended up pulling out that game in Chicago. I was a little concerned, but they're just finding ways to win. And it may not have been pretty against the Blackhawks, but they just get it done. And the Carolina Hurricanes, again, Freddie Anderson, you look at his numbers. Goaltending's huge in the NHL, and he has been really good to start the year. A guy nobody's really been talking about, but one of the best defensive defensemen in the NHL, Jacob Slavin, just a minute muncher, playing almost half a game, playing a period and a half at least per game, and he has just been a workhorse for the Hurricanes. Follow that up with the great goaltending, the great goal scoring from Svechnikov, Aho, Teravainen, everybody else there. Just getting it done. And again, had it not been for the Florida Panthers playing a couple more games, we'd be talking about the Hurricanes as the number one team in the NHL standings. And that's why at number one, on a 10-game point streak to start the year, they have not gone a game without a point yet. That is the Florida Panthers. The Florida Panthers, just everybody on this team has been good, despite everything with Joel Quenneville. Now the next adversity here is Sergei Bobrovsky being day-to-day with a lower body injury. But this is where this team just gets tested, and they have to rise above. And I do think the Florida Panthers will be able to do that. I do still see them as the best team in the NHL, despite an overtime loss. Now the real question is here, with the coaching change and now the goaltending changing up a little bit, we're going to see more of Spencer Knight. Will the Florida Panthers be able to keep up that pace to eclipse the Carolina Hurricanes, who right now it's a three-headed race right now between Florida, Carolina, and Edmonton. All three of those teams have been really, 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 really good to start the season. But like I said, I got to give some love to the Blues because they've been pretty good as well. So like I said, real quick to round out the top five again, you have Winnipeg, St. Louis, Edmonton, Carolina, and the Florida Panthers. Guys, make sure to check out the Power Rankings. We're going to be doing one every Saturday. It depends on the timing. It's probably going to be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock each Saturday afternoon, so stay tuned for that. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Guys, make sure to check out our Streamlabs shop. That is in the description down below. And again, getting into Black Friday here, getting into the holiday season, I'm going to be, when I get a little bit more time, working on some deals for you guys so you could pick up some Goal Line Hockey swag for just a little bit cheaper. So we'll be doing that this week. I'll be letting you guys know. I'll be giving you guys updates on our Instagram as well. So if you want to see the latest news on in terms of the channel updates, make sure to follow us on our Instagram. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again later.